When I hear that intro music, I know to get out of whatever I'm reading and join you on SportsBeat Live. Good morning from Kansas City. And thanks for joining us on a Wednesday and not a Thursday. We altered the schedule this week because of the holidays. And listen, I hope everybody's going to have a great holiday weekend. You know how this works. We talk Chiefs with you. We take your questions and comments. Please send them along, and we talk Chiefs with our esteemed panel of Vahe Gregorian in his green sweater this morning. Hey, Vahe.
Blair, I did what I could for the cause. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Sam McDowell is here. What's up, Sam?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And Herbie Tiopi is also here, not in his green sweater. Peace to you, Herbie.
In the panel, with the exception of Sam McDowell.
Sam Mellinger already in the Christmas spirit, taking a few days off to spend with his family. Happy to see it. And he will be joining us on Sunday for the Chiefs post-game SportsBeat Live. So got a lot of ground to cover this week, even though one of the reasons that we run this show on Thursday is so we could have at least one day of Chiefs press conferences to talk about. On Wednesday, not only does Andy Reid speak, but so does Patrick Mahomes and other players. And we get, if nothing else, an injury report. So we get the sort of the latest updates on the Chiefs' injured players and what that might mean for the upcoming game. So we don't have that advantage today, but we do know that we think that one player is going to be on that list today. That news broke yesterday about this. And it is Chiefs linebacker Anthony Hitchens appeared on the NFL's COVID-19 list on Tuesday. That has a lot of ramifications here, Herbie. Why don't you take us through remind us what it means to be on the list, and then we can talk about what it means for the position.
Yeah, he landed on the list, and initially, the NFL's transaction report doesn't indicate whether he tested positive or whether he was at risk of being a high risk contact of someone who did test positive. The NFL Network eventually came out and said it was a high risk contact, which means he's going to have to go through 5 days of protocol in isolation, and so he might be available for Sunday's game if all the tests come back, in his favor. This affects them tremendously, because if he doesn't play, don't forget Damian Wilson, their other starting linebacker, has missed the last 2 games with a knee injury. Emmanuel Smith, the guy they called up from the practice squad to play on Sunday against the Saints, hurt his hamstring. Dorian O'Daniel, who provided depth, is now on injured reserve with an ankle injury. They're pretty thin all of a sudden. If Damian Wilson and Anthony Hitchens can't play, they're down to Ben Neiman, Darius Harris, and the rookie Willie Gay Jr. Those are the only 3 linebackers that they have currently on the active roster.
That strikes me as being a close to an emergency situation for the Chiefs at that position. And for those that have been clamoring for Willie Gay to get more snaps, I think we would absolutely see that on Sunday if Anthony Hitchens can't play. The other aspect of it is, quietly, Hitchens is having a pretty good season. He's the green dot guy and calls the defensive signals. I guess that would go to Neiman, wouldn't it, if Hitchens can't go?
The other option they could probably do, because remember, their safeties, Tyrann Mathieu specifically and Daniel Sorensen, they play a lot in the box. So they might have one of them shift down and take the linebacker position. But if they go traditional, and who calls you're absolutely correct, the green dot is the guy who is responsible for calling the defensive plays. It might be Ben Neiman.
Yeah, you mentioned Tyrann Mathieu and Daniel Sorensen. Those guys are 1 and 2 in terms of defensive snaps for the Chiefs this year. Tyrann Mathieu rarely comes off the field, 97% of the defensive snaps. And Sorensen's 86% of the defensive snaps for the Chiefs this year. So it's certainly something to keep an eye on today. You and Sam McDowell will be all over the press conference to give us the updates. I'm sure we'll hear about just where things stand with Anthony Hitchens and the position group today and as the week unfolds. But of course, the other big injury news occurred in the game on Sunday against the New Orleans Saints. In the fourth quarter, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was on his way to he was having a terrific game. 97 yards, 79 yards rushing, one of his better outputs of the season. Was running hard, doing a great job, and then on a tackle, he got bent in all sorts of ways and stretched out, and we think we know his status. Sam McDowell, do we know any more than what NFL Network reported on Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday?
No, I mean it looks like I mean he's probably going to miss these last 2 regular season games, but there's the shot at him coming back for the playoffs. I thought live that injury probably looked more painful than it was an actual serious injury, and we do know that his x-rays were clean after the game. So I think we'll probably hear from Andy Reid today that he's not, or now I was going to say he's not practicing, but now we're talking to these guys after practice because of the schedule change. I think we'll hear that he didn't go today.
That's what I'm guessing, that he didn't go. You're right. When I saw when Andy Reid comes out to check on a player, there's an issue there, and he was split. He was bent backwards. It was just a tough tackle, and he just looked very uncomfortable. Maybe the best way to put it. So what are the Chiefs' options at running back now? And I think we know who the next man up is. And doesn't Brett Veach look pretty smart for the signing he made after what was week 3 or 4 of this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see a heavy dose of Le'Veon Bell. And, Darrell Williams has run pretty well in the glimpses we've seen him over the past month. So I don't think it's going to be a situation where Le'Veon Bell's on the field for 90% of the snaps. I still think we'll see a backup, and that guy will be Darrell Williams. Herbie reported yesterday that they did add Elijah McGuire to the practice squad, and now you've got the option this year to elevate guys from the practice squad. I still think it's probably and I know Elijah McGuire was with the team last year on the practice squad, but I still think it's probably early, only a couple days in to try and get him up to speed in time for Sunday. Herbie can correct me if he disagrees there, but I think it's going to be a heavy dose of Le'Veon Bell, but I think Darrell Williams is going to factor into the game plan as well.
Yeah, and Sam, you're absolutely correct. I'm not going to have Elijah McGuire having any carries on Sunday, I don't believe. If anything, it's a death move. You got to have the depth at the running back position. Here's the hint that the Chief knew that Edwards-Helaire was going to miss time. They didn't waste any time on Monday. They brought Elijah McGuire in for a visit, and then on Tuesday he was signed. So that's a good sign. Well, that projects as a good sign that they knew Edwards-Helaire was going to miss these last 2 games because they needed another running back in that room.
Blair, one other thing. I mean, we're talking about the depth, but I do think there's a fortunate twist here in a way for the Chiefs that, Andy Reid, even in the last 2 weeks, has talked about that, Le'Veon's intelligent, but that this offense, his style, understanding the personnel around him, all of that takes time. And it seems like probably from my point of view anyway, maybe to other outside viewers, it seems like a long time by now that it hasn't completely gelled. And I think this is going to, I don't know if it's going to accelerate the pace or not, but it's going to certainly give him more looks, more exposure, more snaps, and they'll know more about where he is with certain things he can and can't do yet. No,
that's right. And look, the Chiefs, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, as we get some clarity on their seeding, and they have an opportunity here to rest a player for a month, basically. Final 2 games of the regular season, the first round of the playoffs, and then they would play in round 2, the second week of the NFL playoffs. So we don't exactly know what all is wrong with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Andrew Leifer, says that he thinks it could be more of a hip thing, and of course there's the high ankle sprain prospect as well. But I don't know. It just seems like a month would be it could be a sufficient time to get back into to get his health back. And look, the running back position is something that we've kind of, I don't know, overlooked, but it seems to be, less of an issue than, or less important than in previous years. It's less important until you lose your starter, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do? Who do they have? And David Kevin Boswell reminds us that Darwin Thompson's still on the roster as well, former draft pick, but has become a more of a special teams specialist for the Chiefs. But can the Chiefs finish out the regular season with Le'Veon Bell, Darrell Williams, and Darwin Thompson as their running back depth chart?
Blair, just a quick thought. I'd like to picture a game where the Chiefs run an empty backfield the whole game and just see what happens.
Yeah.
I think they'd have a shot.
I say yes. I want to say yes because Bell is battle tested. He's been in the playoffs before with the Steelers. We know his past. I think they can handle it with him. And not only that, they're so pass heavy. They don't really rely on the running game like some other teams, like the Tennessee Titans would. So you're not asking Le'Veon Bell, Darrell Williams, or Darwin Thompson to be a Derrick Henry type running back. Because those types of running backs are a thing of the past these days. As long as they're able to figure out a way to distribute the ball between the running backs they have on the roster and still take care of Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, I think they'll be fine.
And maybe, among the more important things that Chiefs running back does is pick up a blitzing, linebacker or defensive back. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire has improved in that over the season. Le'Veon Bell's a pro. I don't think that's an issue with him. And Darrell Williams may be better than all of them when it comes to picking up the extra rusher, which is so important for what the Chiefs are trying to do. So we'll see. The Falcons, the 4-10 Falcons come to Arrowhead Stadium. Is it 5-9 Chargers the following week? So those are it's the football equivalent of first world problems that the Chiefs are having right now. They still have they're still having injuries on the offensive line. Herbie, before we go any further, and I know this requires probably an Andy Reid comment today, and I'm sure you'll ask him about that. But do you have any sense of the offensive line and where things stand in terms of injured players?
Well, we do know that Mike Remmers missed Sunday's game with a back injury and neck injury, and I specifically asked Andy Reid on Monday what is going on with Mitchell Schwartz. The key thing being, will he be available for the postseason? And we know Reid can sometimes be transparent with injuries. If he was optimistic that a player would be back for the postseason, it would be basically say, we'll see. He gave I don't know. So that kind of like raises the alarm that maybe Schwartz won't be available. But, it's really going to come down to how Schwartz feels, how his back feels. And Reid pointed out it's really also with the doctors, how the doctors see it. The good news is we haven't had Rick Burkholder come out on a Wednesday to give an injury update, because that's usually an ominous sign if Rick Burkholder comes out on a Wednesday and says, this is what's going on with an injury. We haven't had that with Schwartz, and if he doesn't come out today and address Edwards-Helaire, then that might be good news for Edwards-Helaire as well.
Anybody want to take a stab at who the Chiefs' second leading rusher is?
Patrick
Mahomes.
Right. Can't get anything by you guys. So that was so when Brian LaBerge was asking about Mahomes rushing, I quickly went to the stats just to confirm that he had the 24-yarder against the Saints on Sunday, which was one of his nicer runs of the year. Okay,
his runs have come at timely points where they needed a first down, and here he is. You think he's going to do it with his arm. Defense plays back, and he just kills him.
Knows exactly where the sticks are. He just knows exactly where the sticks are. Yeah, go ahead, Vi.
Well, I was going to say that too. There's a precision of his understanding what he's trying to do on the run. Every so often he stays up a little longer than you'd like, maybe, but there's a purpose to it. But the thing that I've really started noticing, and maybe he's been doing it all along, and I'm just slow to the realization. It's very interesting, particularly when he's running, how he physically uses the ball for even extra misdirection or deception in ways that with other people I wouldn't trust as much. And I'd be saying, he's carrying it like a loaf of bread. What's he doing? with him, you feel like it's part of the whole spectacle of, getting people away from him. He uses it effectively, in setting up passes too. I've just kind of started focusing on that in a different way. You guys may think it's been that way all along or it's nothing new, but it's just struck me lately.
Well, Demarcus Robinson runs the same way. They both have that talent.
And somehow it feels different.
Ouch.
Oh, I love McDowell. That's my guy. I love him.
Well, how about his option keeper, the Le'Veon Bell touchdown run against the Saints? That speaks directly to Mahomes' talent. He, fools the linebacker or the defensive end, and then pitches it at the precise, gets 5 yards downfield and pitches it at the precise right moment. And what did Bell say after the game? He's never had an easier touchdown in his NFL career.
Yeah, but Blair, that might be a good sort of full circle to this conversation because Le'Veon Bell was really on the same page with Mahomes on that play. He said he expected Mahomes to pitch that ball even though he'd already crossed the line of scrimmage, which does show that there is a connection that's developing there because he also mentioned that most quarterbacks wouldn't do that. So the fact he expected his quarterback to do that illustrates that it must be in practice that they've gotten on the same page a little bit. But to your point, I think these last 2 weeks will only aid that process.
The thing that impressed me the most about that play wasn't that Bell scored. It was the fact that Andy Reid and Mahomes went right at that the left defensive end / right tackle side. Because the play before that, Cam Jordan was ejected. Cam Jordan is pretty good against the run, and they picked on poor Carl Granderson. They went right at him, and that was pretty darn good. They recognized who was there.
That's the running equivalent of picking on a cornerback who just, the rookie corner who just came into the game to replace, the veteran who needed to play off. So that's a good point, Herbie. Okay, we talked a little bit about it. Chiefs have a 2-game lead with 2 games to play in terms of the AFC West after the Steelers ended up losing to the Bengals on Monday Night Football. Boy, the Steelers are reeling, right? Is it 3 in a row after starting 11-0? So Chiefs 13-1, the Steelers and the Bills both at 11-3. That means the Chiefs just have to win one of their final 2 games to clinch the number 1 seed, and even if there's the crazy finish for the Chiefs and they go 0-2 in these final 2 games, there's still a 76% chance that they would finish as the number 1 seed in the AFC because if Buffalo and the Steelers also finished 13-3, the several sets of tiebreakers, it would fall to strength of schedule. And all of this depends on the outcomes of other games over the next 2 weeks, but it looks like the Chiefs would have the strongest strength of schedule among those 3 teams. So it's almost like there's no chance the Chiefs don't get the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. Of course, that's important this year, not just because it means you don't have to play anywhere but your home stadium, but you get 1 fewer game to play. And that's the point of me bringing this up. Would that 1 week of rest be sufficient enough to not have to, Andy Reid, for him to make the decision to rest starters in week 17? Let's just say the Chiefs beat the Falcons on Sunday and they clinch the overall number 1 seed. What happens in week 17 with Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Tyrann Mathieu, Chris Jones, Frank Clark? Vahe, what do you think? We've seen Andy Reid do it both ways.
We have seen it both ways. And, we think about this both in terms of rest, but also risk of injury, right? And that's the big question. And you're right, Blair, it becomes a fundamentally different question if you've got that next week off. You've got more cushion, but it doesn't alleviate any risk during a game either. So I tend to think that he would pull back for that last game if that number 1 seed's assured. And I don't see why you would put that exposure out there. I get that the X factor is staying sharp though, and that's something that they'll have to figure out. we know Andy has that extraordinary record after a bye during the regular season. I can't remember how that's played out in the playoffs, but I suspect it's pretty good record in the playoffs when he's had the bye on the few occasions he has had it. So my hunch would just be that they would pull back. It's an interesting question though, whether you would pull back fully, right? Like, and start Chad Henne. I don't know. I tend to lean that way though.
Treat it like a preseason game. If you've already clinched the number 1 seed heading into the season finale, and if your intent is to get your guys a few snaps, then treat it like a preseason game. Give the first 2 series to the first team offense, and then pull them. And to Vahe's point, the injuries. It's always the unknown. But let's not forget, last year, granted, they didn't know they clinched yet, but Juan Thornhill suffered an ACL injury in the season finale. So, they had to make some moves or shuffle the back end of the coverage in the playoffs. But, Thornhill was a huge loss. And I don't think you want to risk that, knowing that you want to make a run at the Super Bowl again.
Yeah, this situation is ripe for hindsight, no matter what they do. I will say the one thing that I wonder if is going to be a factor is this team had no offseason. They did not have OTAs, they did not have a preseason, and they came out on opening night and destroyed the Houston Texans. And I wonder if because obviously the one side of the spectrum is, do you want to stay sharp? Do you want to risk losing your edge? I wonder if they look back at that and say, hey, despite all of that, they still looked really good on opening night, and they hadn't played a football game since February.
And that's a fantastic point, Mac, because if you remember after that game and even the week following the game, that question did come up a few times with some of the players. And they mentioned that the reason why they looked so good was because of how Andy Reid had schemed everything out or had plans in place during training camp. So they were able to hit the ground running like they didn't miss anything.
How much of a consideration should it be if Patrick Mahomes is on the edge of an MVP award, or he goes into week 17 needing 150 passing yards to get to 5,000, or Travis Kelce has the consecutive game reception streak going over well over 100? Did those types of things factor into a decision?
I don't think it should. Remember, all these people will always say it's never about individual goals. It's about the team goal. And the team goal is to get to the Super Bowl. As far as the MVP vote, those votes have probably already been submitted. I remember way back when I used to have a vote until I stopped paying my membership dues, but that's beside the point. A lot of that stuff was already submitted by week 15 coming into now, week 16, because the vote is set up and designed because if you run into this scenario, there won't be players playing in week 17. So some of those votes have already probably been put in.
It was interesting the other day. Sam McDowell, I think you were asking about this, or maybe it was somebody else, but your face was on my screen. Andy's cognizance of Travis Kelce's numbers. Like, Andy was sort of at once, as I recall anyway, saying, I don't really know what those numbers are. But I thought he gave a little hint that if he knows about these things and they come to historic significance, he's as likely as it's pretty likely to try to make it work. Again, if it's not out of the range or out of the scheme of things. So back to the point you made, Herbie, earlier, I could see if some things are at stake that could be achieved with 2 series, in the finale. I think there might be some Andy force feeding of a record or 2.
Okay, I've written down Herbie not paying membership fees as a topic to revisit at some point, and
can we not revisit the fact? So during these Chiefs press Zoom calls, Vahe just has my picture pinned up on the screen.
Sam Mac on Vahe's screen. Okay, got it.
As long as it's not a McDowell shrine in Vahe's house, we're good.
Hey, just another thing to keep in mind. Drew Brees has. I said it, Herbie, not you. Keep that in mind. Drew Brees has 5,000-yard passing seasons. Nobody else has more than 1. So it'd be a nice get if Mahomes could reach 5,000 yards. But keep this in mind too. Starting next year, there'll be an additional regular season game. We're talking about a 17-game regular season, not a 16-game regular season starting next year. So they're, those types of records when it comes to total season totals, maybe we look at them a little differently starting next year anyway. So we'll see if Week 17 becomes a Chase Daniel week for the Chiefs.
Or Mahomes week. Didn't he start Week 17?
That's right. Patrick Mahomes week started Week 17. Boy, how interesting does that turn out to be in the history of of the Chiefs?
Yeah,
we're not allowed to talk about that game with Sam not on the call, I don't think.
That's right. All right. Glenn Rice wants to know if this is the airing of grievances. Happy Festivus, guys.
Is this Glenn Rice of Kansas City?
Yes, yes, it is.
Glenn from Kansas City.
That's what our group text is for.
All right, let's begin to wind it down with this this topic. Pro Bowl selections came out this week, and the Chiefs had 7, matching the most of any team. Herbie, do you know them off the top of your head?
Seahawks, Baltimore Ravens, and the Green Bay Packers. You mentioned how many had 7 or the Pro Bowl?
There were 7 Pro Bowl selections, right?
Yeah, you had Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Eric Fisher, Tyrann Mathieu, Chris Jones. How many was that?
Frank Clark.
Yeah, Frank Clark, and oh boy, who was the 7th one?
Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill. Hello.
There you go. Any surprises?
Probably not. I think Fisher did have a pretty darn good season this year. He was solid as heck. Maybe Frank Clark is a surprise to me. I don't think we've seen the sacks that we would have liked to see. Even Chris Jones only had 6.5. Clark is entering week 16 with just, we're in 16 now, with just 5 sacks on the year. I don't know if that's Pro Bowl caliber. Usually when you see fan voting, they're amazed by not just the name, but also the numbers. And so, you're always going to get people who were snubbed, but, the fans spoke, so that's who it was.
I just wonder if people are seeing something we're not seeing with Frank Clark. It's just the numbers aren't there. And look, that was kind of the case during the regular season last year. And it was about this time of year that he went to a different gear. And in the postseason, he was just fantastic. I think that's what Chiefs fans have to be hoping for this time around with Frank Clark.
I will say, when you watch the tape from this last game, I thought Frank Clark had as good of a day as he's had all season. He was really active in the backfield consistently against the Saints. I thought he was really good in the game.
When I watch Frank Clark and I watch replays, the thing that strikes me is if he had a second move, but it's everything. It seems to be trying to beat his guy around, at the edge, and it doesn't cut back inside, or doesn't have a spin, or at least we don't see it, or if it's not effective anyway. And maybe it won't matter down the stretch and in the postseason. But I always think of Frank Clark, being able to develop a second move a solid second move that would really help him. So, okay, guys, we're on a Christmas schedule, so we're going to end this a little earlier today than we usually do. So, Sam McDowell, Vahe Gregorian, Herbie Tiopi, and in spirit, Sam Mellinger, thanks for joining us today. Thank you all for your questions and your comments. And please join us after Sunday's Chiefs-Falcons game, which begins at noon. And we would be remiss if we didn't say thank you to Beth Welsh, our producer, and Merry Christmas to Beth as well. So, okay, guys, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you again soon.